Thanks everybody for being here. My name is Kristen Schaefer. I am Head of Business Development and Sales for Wells Fargo's Commercial and Technology Banking Group. So we're so happy to be a part of this conference. This is the second year. The attendance has grown. I also have to give a shout out to the ladies because last year I think there were maybe 4 or 5 women here. And I had just moved here and people said, there are no female executives in the state of Utah. So I just want to give a shout out to the ladies. Thank you for coming and attending. Can we give a shout out? Thank you. Thanks. So all of you know what we do at Wells Fargo, right? I just wanted to reiterate the mission that we're really here to help companies grow and scale. No matter what life cycle you're in, from startup to Fortune 50, we're here to help you really grow and build scalable solutions for you and manage your risk. So that's really important to us. Later, if you're here, we have people from our technology and venture banking group here, our asset-based lending group. Come see me. I'm kind of the jack of all trades here with the group, so happy to be here. I'm so excited to introduce Caroline Gleich. So I have to tell you a funny story. Dave Chase and I were talking about this and planning, and I'm on the planning committee for this, and he called me and said, hey, I don't know if you know this girl. He said, she reminds me a lot of you, actually. He goes, she's a professional skier, and I kind of laughed, and I said, is it Caroline that you're talking about? And he goes, it is. How do you know her? And I said, well, we're kind of sister-in-laws-ish. We date brothers, so that's funny. They look a lot alike. So anyway, I've gotten to know Caroline a lot over the last few years, and I have to tell you, she's awesome. She's a rock star. So, we sit around family dinners, and it's pretty funny. It's like a scene out of a movie. Kristen and Bill, what did you do this weekend? Well, we went to Olive Garden. We went to Home Depot. Rob and Caroline, what did you do? Oh, we climbed. We went to Tibet and climbed the 6th highest mountain in the world. So if you want to feel like a real winner, be a part of this family. It's pretty funny. I'm teasing. But I want to introduce Caroline. So Caroline is a professional ski mountaineer and environmental activist. She's based here in Utah. She's been on the cover of many ski magazines, and I had to write this down so I don't forget, but Ski, Powder, Backcountry, and she's also been in multiple ski films. 2 years ago, this is really impressive, she was the first woman to ski all of the lines of the shooting gallery. And if you don't know what that is, it's a guide to steep skiing in the Wasatch. So first woman to do it. I would actually encourage you to watch a movie. REI made a movie called Follow Through, starring Caroline, that talks about just the journey of her doing the shooting gallery. So pretty cool. So I do want to say, no stranger to risk management. She's going to talk about that. We're all, same principles apply to us in business as being up on a mountain. I think the riskiest thing she did, and it was pretty successful, is she proposed to Rob. I don't know if you want to stand up and wave your hand. This is her partner, Rob, on the summit of Choyu recently. So Choyu is the 6th highest mountain in the world, and they just climbed that, and Caroline proposed, and he said yes. So with further ado, Caroline, we're excited to hear from you.
Awesome. Thank you, Kristen, for that lovely introduction. And if you guys haven't met or worked with Kristen, you should. She's awesome. So definitely go over and say hi. And thank you so much for having me here today. I'm so excited for this opportunity to talk about some of the parallels between what I do, ski mountaineering, and risk management there, and then in your world, in the business arena. And so Kristen kind of spoiled a couple of my early slides by giving away what happened, but I wanted to tell you, so a lot of people are like, what is ski mountaineering? And it's this really niche sport, okay? So I specialize in climbing up the mountains. You can see this is our boot pack where we came up, and then I ski down. And so this last photo, that one I just skipped over, is that was in Utah, skiing some powder. And this photo here is from a recent trip. We just got back from Choyu in Tibet, in the Himalayas. It's the 6th highest peak in the world. And this photo was taken at about 22,000 feet. And then this photo here is in Chamonix, France, which is a really good training ground for the Himalayas. And I'm really drawn to these big mountains of the world. And so I just wanted to show a couple of photos from this. So also what I do is incredibly risky because you not only have the challenges of skiing, but you have to have all the skills of a climber. So you're managing avalanches, you're managing the fall potential, and there's crevasses, ice fall, rock fall, all these different things. And I'm going to share some of the lessons that I've learned over the course of doing this for the past 14 years. So Choyu, so a lot of what I've been training to do is to take my skills to the Himalayas. And starting in Utah, Utah's been an amazing training ground, and other peaks around the world. So this is our advanced base camp here at 18,700 feet. And so this was a month-long expedition, and I just got home 2 weeks ago, so I'm still pretty fresh. But when I got up here, I started to actually get really, really sick. And over the course of 4 days, I got so sick that I had to descend down to base camp, which is at 16,000 feet. I had to walk down on supplemental oxygen because I was unable to walk without supplemental oxygen. I was so sick with the early stages of high altitude pulmonary edema. So that's when your lungs start to fill with fluid. And I thought, there is no way I'm going to be able to climb this mountain. All I wanted to do was go home. And so after 4 days of recovering, I was able to recover enough and go back up the mountain, acclimatize, and this is on the way to the summit. And behind me here is the shadow of the mountain. When the sun rises on these big peaks, they're so massive that the mountain casts a shadow behind you. And so this is always one of the most magical mountains, the most magical moments as a mountaineer. And at the summit, I proposed. He said yes, so that was really exciting. And right here is Everest, and then Lhotse. So Choyu is about 20 kilometers from Everest. So this was a real important highlight, and I just wanted to share some of these. And I skied down, and so it's about 6,000 vertical feet of skiing down between almost 27,000 feet and then 21,000 feet. And it was one of the best. I mean, the snow was okay. It's not always the best snow on these big mountains, but it was a dream come true for me because I've always been wanting to go to the Himalayas. So I wanted to give a quick mention to the brands that support me. So I make my living as a professional athlete, as an ambassador for these brands, and I'm really conscientious about the brands that I partner with, and these ones, they have a commitment for environmental and social responsibility. So that's something that's really important to me. And then I just wanted to show a couple of magazine covers that I've been on over the years. So this was a cover that came out in 2013. It also won Photo of the Year. This was taken right up at Alta, Utah. And then here, backcountry, I've been on ski. I've been in 2 Warren Miller films, and then as Kristen said, I had a documentary come out with REI last year. And so in backcountry skiing and ski mountaineering, there's this really expected thing that happens when people begin doing these sports. Normally, people start out making really risky decisions. Then they have a close call, an accident, a near miss, or a fatality, and then they start to become more cautious. Now, I'm the exact opposite, and from the beginning, I was opposite of that, and I'm going to tell you why. I grew up actually in Minnesota playing ice hockey. I never skied competitively or climbed competitively. But I would come out to Utah with my family. I'd come out west twice a year. These were my favorite childhood experiences. So we would ski at sometimes Taos, Big Sky, but then we started coming to Utah every year, and we would do a ski trip in the winter and then a backpacking trip in the summer. And so here's me and my dad, and this is my half-brother, Martin. So I have 3 brothers, and then I have 3 older half-siblings. And then this is in New Zealand on the Franz Josef Glacier. And I just remember being a little girl coming from Minnesota where it's just flat as the eye can see, looking up at these big peaks. And just from a young age, I knew I wanted to be up there and I wanted to climb them. And I was going to figure out how to make that my career as an adult. And then this is in the Wind River Range. This is my prolonged awkward adolescence phase. I was a late bloomer. And my older brothers, this is my half-brother, Martin. And then here we are in the Wind River Range. And even though I probably complained a lot on these trips, they were really hard. They were my most memorable childhood experiences. And so if you guys have kids out there and you're taking them to do these things and it seems like they hate it, they'll probably remember it afterward. And it'll probably become some of their favorite memories. So push past that. So when I was 15 years old, I got a call from my parents. I was at a party that would change my life. I got a call that my half-brother, Martin, had been killed in an avalanche in Big Cottonwood Canyon. So he and his partner were climbing up Stairs Gulch on Storm Mountain, and this was late April 2001, and a big glide avalanche came down and buried them both. And they didn't come home, and they did a search, and they found some remnants of this avalanche and a ski pole. And so shortly after this, my family and we came out for his memorial, and we walked up to the site where they retrieved his body. And I just remember this, he was buried about 10 feet deep. And I remember at his memorial that his hands were just crushed. They were black and blue from the impact of the avalanche. And so for me, this sent a shockwave through my family. And being the oldest kid who was at home, I really saw and felt all of my parents' grief. And so before I'd ever set foot in the backcountry, before I'd ever climbed any mountains on my own, I had felt this hurt, and I'd seen what the mountains can do. And for me, not coming home and having an accident, it was just not an option. And so, most backcountry skiers and ski mountaineers, they start out risky and then they reel it in. I was the exact opposite. I had felt that hurt before I'd ever felt the joy of an untracked powder run, and I just knew I had to come home. And so that kind of formed the backdrop about how I approached mountaineering, and I just couldn't put my family through the pain of losing another person. And so what I've learned over the years is, as fellow risk takers in the business arena, my call to action for you is to navigate risky situations with transparency, openness, and communication. To really make yourself vulnerable. And so, transparency. It's a quality that makes something obvious or easy to understand. A lack of hidden agendas or conditions accompanied by the availability of full information required for collaboration, cooperation, and collective decision-making. And then openness is a lack of secrecy or concealment, a frankness, a freedom to express views and ideas regardless of rank or seniority. Now, I really like the second part of this definition, because what I've learned from studying accidents and avalanches in the mountains is that it's really important to create a group culture where people who aren't as experienced can speak up. Because as you get more experienced, your blind spots get bigger. And so it's really important to have a company culture where people can speak up and where they have that freedom. And then communication, the successful conveying or sharing of ideas and feelings, a means of connection between people or places. And again, I urge you to make yourself vulnerable. It's difficult to put all your cards on the table and to put it all out there, but for me, I've found that it helps to have a smooth experience in the mountains in managing risk. And this right here is one of the most exposed faces I've ever skied. This is Mount Dixon in the Southern Alps of New Zealand, and we skied this line off right on the edge of this huge hanging glacier. So when I'm starting a climb and I'm planning a mountain that I want to go up, I start at a really weird spot. I start by visualizing the worst case scenario. So I think about the mountain and all the different places where I could be swept by avalanches or fall, and from that starting point, I begin to plan my risk management strategy. And so most climbers plan, but worst case scenario is not their starting points. And so one of the things that I always do is I try to read as much from other people's accidents and what they've shared. So every year, the American Alpine Club publishes this book, Accidents in North American Mountaineering. And by reading that, I can learn so much where people went wrong. And what we've come to see, what's really interesting about these things, is a lot of times it is really experienced people, and the mistakes they make don't have to do with the objective hazards, they have to do with the human factor. They fall into these decision-making traps, and then they spiral out of control, and one decision, they escalate. And so I've really learned a lot from reading this. And I highly encourage you to be willing to talk and write about your failures and near misses, because in my industry, we're so much stronger when people own those and open up about them. And so this brings me to a story I want to tell from Mount Rainier in spring 2014. summer 2017. Last summer, I was heading up to Seattle for a work trip, and I'd always wanted to climb and ski Mount Rainier, and I wanted to do it in a single day. And I'm always checking weather, and so as I was planning for this business trip to Seattle, I checked the weather forecast, and there was the most amazing weather window at the end of my trip. And Rainier is notorious for having bad weather. So just like you guys are probably always monitoring the money markets, trying to predict what's gonna happen in the stock markets and industry-wise, I'm always doing that with weather. So when I had this weather window, I knew I had to bring my skis and my mountaineering gear with me and try to find a team to go up Rainier. And so I wanted to climb and ski this route, the Finger, because it's one of the most direct ways up the mountain, and it's a 10,000 vertical foot run down. So that's like 3 snowbird tramps stacked on top of each other. This is like a total dream line. So I put an open invite out on social media to see if I could find partners because, again, I had no partners, no plan. I was trying to put it together with this weather window. So as these responses started coming in, I started to really vet these people and to make sure that they would have the stamina, the technical expertise, everything to do this route in a single day. And so as the team started to come together and I started to ask all those hard questions, I also began to study the hazards of the route, to really pick through it with a fine-tooth comb. Where would we be exposed to the dangers of falling in crevasses? Where would there be icefall, rockfall, all these different things? And I was communicating this with the team. So I found 2 sets of 2 guys that were really eager to go up that I felt would make a good team. So I was corralling everyone together and trying to manage it all. And while we were doing that, we're thinking through the transitions, the details of every transition. So what time would we start? Where would we sleep? What would we eat? All these different things. So we made a plan. We got up there about 4 p.m., got our permits to climb, and then we laid down to take a little nap in the parking lot. At 10 p.m., 10:30, we woke up, and it was just getting dark because this was right around the summer solstice. And as the sun was setting, we were preparing to head up the mountain. And we didn't take many photos during the night because it was a new moon, it was incredibly dark, but this was high up on the mountain at sunrise. And so one of the things that I always try to do in the mountains when I'm navigating these risky situations is to fight the tendency to go along with the group, because it's so easy to just get into that mindset of like, let's just go along with what everyone else is doing. So I always try to fight the group think, and a lot of times I'll ask someone, like an example is, are you going to bring crampons on that route? And sometimes everyone kind of has their own risk tolerance level. So I'll sometimes bring my crampons even when the other people aren't, in case I encounter icy conditions on the mountain. And it's just, it's hard to go against the grain, but I really always try to fight the tendency to do that. See. So this is higher up on the mountain. Thank you. Okay, so we had taken a really detailed photo of the route, and we were able to find this one snow bridge that was just hanging on, because normally this route goes out of condition in like late May, and so being able to do it in June. But throughout the whole time, we had incredible teamwork. We managed the ropes really well. We communicated well. We navigated this risky situation, and we were able to reach the summit of Mount Rainier. And we had one of the best ski descents of my life, and it was just the perfect snow. And so, well, most climbers don't start by visualizing the worst case scenario. By doing that and then navigating the situation with openness, transparency, and communication, by me putting all my fears out on the table and talking to my team about them, we were able to accomplish this route, to ski this mountain that normally takes people 2 to 4 days. We were able to do it in 11 hours. And so that was one of my best days on skis. Here's another shot. And so the next lesson that I've learned in the mountains is you have to be willing to walk away. And this was a really hard lesson for me to learn. and especially when you've invested everything. So in 2014, Peru was one of these goals that I set for myself that I felt I needed to do in order to make it to the Himalayas. Peru is a great training ground for ski mountaineers and especially for climbers. And at this point in my career, I felt a real desire to validate myself, to prove myself, and I also wanted to lead my own trip here. And so I spent weeks and months doing planning for this trip, days of travel, and we arrived in the town of Juarez at 10,000 feet. And so we had a 3-week-long trip, and I had spent so much time doing our logistics and itinerary for this. And so getting into town, we talked to other climbers about what was happening with conditions, and we weren't getting the trip reports that we wanted. We'd heard that it was a slow start to the climbing season, the conditions had been wet, it had been very stormy, and we also heard not many people had been able to reach the highest peaks, which is what I was there to do. I was there to ski Toklarāhu and Artisan Rahu, which are some of the higher, more technical peaks in this mountain range. But I didn't want that to deter us. I wanted to go see for ourselves, and so we continued acclimatizing. We went to Laguna Chirrup, and then we, after a couple more days of rest and recovery, we headed up into the Ashinka Valley base camp, loaded up the mules. We had the base camp chef hired. It's a really incredible place. And upon arriving there, we were greeted by completely cloudy skies and rainy weather. Again, it's not that splitter weather forecast, that clear weather forecast you want for going up into these big mountains. And so from the Ashinka Valley base camp, we could see this was the line of my dreams. This is Toklarāhu. It's over 20,000 feet, and it's not been skied very many times. So we hung out here for a day or two, and then we went up Ashinka, which is a smaller peak. It's kind of used as acclimatizing. And we had a minute of clear weather, and then it totally socked back in, and continuing our climb. And I can't stress how difficult this is. When you're acclimatizing and you're carrying all your own stuff, it's so hard and so painful. And at the top, I just wanted to lay down and take a nap. But then the sun came out as we were hanging out, getting ready to go. And so Peru and the mountains there, they're these almost tropical glaciers. They're really special. But when the sun comes out, it is one of the most intense suns I've ever felt. And as it hit our skin, all of a sudden we got so hot, it felt like our skin was melting. And then all around us, in these huge mountains, they just started to come alive as the sun continued to warm the snow. All of a sudden, we heard the thundering roar of avalanches and icefall as all these big seracs started breaking off. And so that was really scary. And so we gingerly made our way down the mountain. And you really start to worry when it's that warm that the crevasses are going to open up and you're going to fall in. So we made our way down. We had a long walk back to base camp. And from our base camp, I had my partner, now my fiance, he came to me and he said, "We're not going up Toklarāhu. I'm not going up that mountain." And I said, I was so upset, and I was so mad at him, and I called him all sorts of names. I called him a pussy. I told him to grow a pair, that he needed to sack up. We needed to do this, because I had planned this trip. I had invested so much time and money getting there, acclimatizing, and I did not want to walk away. But you can't push someone to do something they don't want to. And it was a really hard moment for me of letting go. And it was so hard and to walk away from that mountain that I had dreamed about skiing and planned for so long. And so this is Toklarāhu. We didn't go up it, but we made another plan. We had a plan B, and plan B actually didn't turn out to be that bad. So we still got to ski this is Uras Este. It's an 18,000 foot mountain in Peru next to Ashinka. So it's a little smaller than what I had wanted to ski. And we redid our itinerary. We went into a different base camp, and we skied this mountain called Pisco. And we saw one of the most beautiful sunrises I've ever seen. And after a couple of days here, we got back into Juarez, and we got back on internet, and we read the news, and we heard that 3 very experienced Estonian climbers had been swept into an avalanche on Toklarāhu several days after we decided not to go up there. And so it was a team of 4. 3 out of the 4 were swept into a crevasse by an avalanche at 19,000 feet, and I don't think they were even able to recover the bodies. And so for me, that was a really sobering moment, that letting go was hard, but it was worth it. And in a high-risk situation, you have to be willing to walk away when the conditions aren't right, even if you're all in, and no matter how much you've invested. And it was a good lesson to not let a bad decision become a catastrophe. And I think you see this a lot in investing too, where people have put so much, they just keep pouring more and more resources, and it's just one of those things that it's a hard lesson to learn. So my coach at the time, Scott Johnston, he's a great mountaineering coach. He wrote a book called Training for the New Alpinism. And when I got home, he said, the mountains will always be there. You can come back to them when you are better prepared, but not if you're dead. So I always remember that. So my next slide, the next thing I was going to say is what I've learned about risk is you can't bluff your partners. Risk has no margin of error for bluffing. So this was Ecuador, November 2013. This was my first high altitude ski mountaineering trip, and I learned a lot on this trip. So here's the packing shots. And after a week of acclimatizing around Quito, we made our way to Cayambe, which is the 3rd highest peak. So we had this, again, like a crazy itinerary mapped out that was just really fast-paced. And Ecuador is such a cool place to visit. These mountains, there's this volcano avenue, these huge snow-capped peaks with the rainforest right next to it. You have the Galapagos Islands that are right off the coast. And there's no ski resorts here, so not many people bring their skis. It's an obscure place to go skiing, but it was really cool. So in Ecuador, they have a law where you have to hire an Ecuadorian mountain guide because they had so many tourists who would go up these mountains not understanding the risks and then have accidents. So they require you to hire a mountain guide. And so that was no problem. We had hired a mountain guide to come with us up Cayambe, and we summited. Now the thing is, the Ecuadorian mountain guides, they're not skiers, so we couldn't find one who could ski. And when you're skiing these mountains, it's a little different than how you climb them. It's a little more risky because you ski down, you climb up, sometimes roped up, but you ski down without a rope. And the reason is that when you have that forward momentum, you can just kind of, if there's a crevasse that's hidden, you're less likely to fall into it if you're on skis rather than on foot. And so after this first mountain, our Ecuadorian mountain guide, realizing that he would have to walk down without a rope team, he decided he didn't want to do the rest of the trip with us because he felt it was too risky for him. And so we were in a pinch where we had to try to find another guide who could ski in Ecuador, where there's not one. And so after putting all our feelers out in Quito, we were able to find one guy who could ski, who was a mountain guide, because if you don't have the guide, you can't get access to the mountains. And so the caveat was he had just arrived from Seattle, from sea level, and he wasn't acclimatized. And these mountains, they're really high. And so he bluffed. He bluffed to take the job, and he said he could do it. So our first peak we did with him, with the Ecuadorian ski guide, was Cotopaxi, which is 19,000, a little over 19,000 feet. And we had perfect conditions, perfect weather, perfect snow. We made it up and down really quick, which is important because the longer you're exposed to the high altitude, the more likely you are to get sick. And so this was like a really cool moment looking into the summit crater and then getting ready to ski. And as you can see, it was just dreamy snow, that little bit of fresh snow on top of the ice. And it was just one of the best ski descents of my life. It was so good, a perfect pitch. And so that mountain went great, and one of the problems was we didn't take the time to ask the hard questions of him or to think creatively about problem solving. And had we done that, had we trusted that doubt and paid attention to that red flag that he hadn't taken time to acclimatize, we could have prevented what happened on this mountain, Chimborazo. It's 20,548 feet, so it's higher than Denali. And so as we started going up the mountain, the snow quality really started to deteriorate. And what was happening on Chimborazo is there was a neighboring volcano that was actively erupting, and it was spewing ash onto the mountain. So as that black ash hit the snow, it caused the snow to melt and turn into ice really quickly. Like, think about those snow mounds in the parking lot at the end of the season that are just rock hard. The whole mountain was like that. And we had this goal of trying to ski this line on the north side of the mountain. So we were gonna ski up and over the mountain onto the other side. As we started going up, our Ecuadorian mountain guide started to show increasing signs of altitude sickness. So headache, nausea, confusion, but instead of going down, we kept going up. And as we got higher and higher on the mountain, the snow kept getting worse, and we encountered, these are called penitentes, and they're very common in South America. And they're like these head-high ice sculptures. They're incredibly difficult to climb through, and also what happens when you have this kind of melting is the crevasses open up. But we still had wanted to go try to ski this other line on the north side of the mountain, so we kept going forward. And this shows you what it was like. And this is at 20,000 feet. And I can't tell you how difficult it is, even just to like bend down and buckle your boot at 20,000 feet. Like, you get out of breath doing anything. And so as we got up here, the clouds started to roll in. We were trying to figure out where to go to ski this other line, seeing if the snow was better, if we could get down that way. And our guide said, I have to go down now. And he bailed. He started descending down the route we came up. And my partner and I from the US were looking, trying to find this other way down. And then a few minutes later, he got on the radio and started yelling, help, help, screaming. And then the radio died. And then we heard him yelling, and we started, getting organized and getting ourselves together to try to find him. And then after a few minutes, it went silent. We couldn't hear him anymore. So we spent the next 6 hours combing the summit plateau at 20,000 feet, looking for him. We figured he had fallen in a crevasse. We were worried he had a broken leg. And after 6 hours, we were succumbing to the effects of the altitude ourselves, and we were getting a little bit of frost nip on our fingers and toes, and we had to make the decision to leave, to descend without him. And at that point, we initiated a rescue on our satellite GPS and texting to rescuers that we needed food and water, and that we were missing our guide at 20,000 feet. That was one of the hardest decisions that I've ever made. So we started descending, and the clouds rolled in, and the storm came in, and we got lost in the whiteout. It was just super hard to figure out where to go. So I kept thinking I saw him in a rock, or like in the shadows in the clouds below. The first time it was a rock. The second time it was a rock. So now we're down climbing. We got off route. We're on this really, really steep pitch of ice, and right below I see him, and he's stumbling around, and it's right before nightfall, and we were able to link up with him, intercept the rescuers right before it got dark. It had been almost a 24-hour day on the mountain. So this is the photo in the storm when we got linked up with the rescuers, and they gave us food and water. And so it was a crazy day. It was one of the closest calls that I've ever had. But what I really learned from that is that, again, risk has no margin of error for bluffing. And these things, they're only going to get worse on the mountain. So if you have the doubts and you have the red flags, take the time to vet the partners and the situation beforehand. And we were fine in the end. I mean, my parents probably got a few more gray hairs from this day, but his bluff put us all at risk. And so my last story takes us to Chamonix, France, which is the death sports capital of the world. And this is a place where you have these mountains that rise 10,000 feet from the valley floor. You have huge glaciers and tons of crevasses, and you have lifts that take you right to the top. The only difference is the lifts, there's no ski patrol or avalanche control, so you have to do that all on your own. And so for this trip, I started working with a partner, a friend of mine, my friend KT. We started the planning before the trip, and from the get-go, we just communicated so well together. We were both super honest and transparent and open, and we communicated really well. And it was great actually to do this in a small team of just 2 because it allows a little bit more nimble and flexible decision making. And when you're just a team of 2 or 3 in the mountains, you're not as brave or bold. And I think that's a really good thing because one of my mentors once told me that pride is the #1 thing that kills ski mountaineers. And so we were able to match conditions to our energy levels, to our risk tolerance. We were able to reach the summit of some of these big peaks despite massive risks. And so this is on top of the Aiguille d'Argentière, which is a super classic ski mountaineering line. And this is going up the Aiguille de Chardonnay in the Argentière Basin. And I don't know why that photo is not coming up. Let's see. Is that HDMI still plugged in? Okay, cool. Awesome. So this is on the summit of the Aiguille de Chardonnay. This was one of the rowdiest days I've had on skis. So we did this huge traverse of the whole mountain, skied down the West Couloir, and we were able to ski a dozen other huge lines. This is rappelling off the bridge on the Aiguille de Midi. I highly recommend a visit to Cham. It's one of the most beautiful mountain ranges. And so that kind of communication, reaching the summit despite the massive risks because we were open and communicating with each other. I urge you to bring those things into the teamwork that you do every day. And the thing I was going to say is that when the conditions are right and when everything aligns, when you have the weather and you have these, when it's good to go, you'll know. And this is a photo from last season. This is called the Shield, and it's a feature on Mount Superior, which is right across the street from Alta and Snowbird. And I've always wanted to ski this. It comes into condition maybe once a season. And there may still be risk when you do this, but when it's good to go, it'll feel right, and you'll know. So my call to action is to trust your intuition, and when everything looks good, you have the good weather window to go for it, and to navigate these risky situations with transparency, openness, and communication. And so that concludes my talk. I wanted to mention that I have an upcoming trip in spring 2019. I'm trying to put together to climb Everest. So I'd love to chat if you're interested in partnership opportunities. And I'd love to keep in touch. So you can follow more of my trips on social media, reach out. I'd love any feedback on email or through my website. So thank you all so much. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to share some of my stories from the mountains.